Hello, beautiful people. I bring warm greetings from Trinidad and Tobago. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to be here with you at the Live the Life You Deserve Summit. I say this all the time. Wherever there is a gathering of women, there is dunamis in the room. There is power in the room. And it's no different in the virtual space. So it is an honor for me to be here with all you powerful women. For those of you who are new to me, my name is Jiselle Alleyne Clement. I am an empowerment speaker, vision coach, and mentor. I help women of faith as they navigate through life's disruptive transitions, and I equip them with the tools and the strategies to successfully and strategically navigate these transitions. So I am here today to share some concepts, to share some tools, to share some techniques with you on the topic overcoming transition paralysis. How many of you love to travel? Oh my word. Pre-pandemic, I loved travel. I loved the thrill of going through airports. I loved the thrill of even packing my suitcase and choosing the outfits. And oh my word, I love just the thought of the shopping that is going to happen on these trips. But one thing I did not like was the transition through the terminals. The getting to the gate, the trying to find your gate, the thought that if you are late, you are going to miss your flight. That part of traveling would have me all in a knot. I would seriously start to panic. And I thought about this. How could you love traveling so much, but experience such a negative response and a negative reaction at the thought of getting to a terminal? And after thinking about it, that's where I came up with the concept of transition paralysis. You see, it was the fear of the unknown. It was the fear of, I do not know the next step. What if I misunderstood? What if I get delayed? What if? And life is like that. We love certain aspects of our life, but it's that small portion that we have an issue with, and it puts us in that state of paralysis. And so as we go through life and we experience each transition from one season into the next, we need to understand and we need to adopt the tools and the strategies to successfully navigate these transitions. And so a definition of transition states that a transition is the ability to adapt to internal and external change. And you adapt through your knowledge acquisition, through your behavior, through your emotions, and through your attitudes. And so with each life transition that we make, we need to adapt. We need to get the formula to successfully adapt to this change that is occurring. And many things would initialize a transition. The death of a loved one would put you in a state of transition. A broken relationship, a divorce, moving from one state to the next, moving from one country to the next, are just few examples of a transition. And what happens at the point of a transition is what I like to call a disruptive element. And so it's the volatility of the situation that is causing the disruption in your life and putting you in the space of transition. And if you're like me, as I described my fear and my angst with traveling and getting to the gate, it puts you in a state of paralysis. We all have experienced this with this pandemic. 18 months ago, we did not expect to be in a worldwide situation that put us in a state of transition paralysis. And so with each disruption, it destabilizes you. There's a break in your norm. There's a break in continuity. And there's a radical change. Again, hear the word used, radical change. This radical change affects us emotionally. Can you identify? This radical change, this disruption in your life, when it occurs, it impacts you mentally. And this disruptive element, it also impacts you physically. We feel the physical impact of a disruption. In studying women, professional women, women in leadership, he found that while women were competent as leaders in their industries, leaders in their companies, holding top leadership position, and they were competent, they were effective in these positions, when faced with a transition, and they looked particularly at transitioning from one leadership position to the next, when faced with a transition, they found that these same women who were boss ladies in the boardroom became ineffective in managing the transition from one leadership position to the next. And I have used this as a springboard in analyzing the transition experience of any woman, not only the professional woman, the stay-at-home mom, the young girl, the teenager, the retired woman. It's the same principle. When faced with a transition, they become ineffective, and therefore I have coined the term, they become paralyzed. They experience transition paralysis. And so, using this understanding of how women experience transition, I want to introduce to you today a technique that I have developed called the I-CLAP technique of transition management. I-C-L-A-P. I-CLAP technique of transition management. You see, in our attempt to get through the transition, and it's well-intentioned because I think we have the rudimentary understanding that we cannot stay in this position. We must move forward. But do we have the right tools? Are we approaching it the right way? Are we dealing with all the fallout, both, what did I say, the emotional, the mental, and the physical fallout of the disruption in your life? And so again, borrowing from transition theory, it was found that the emotional fallout had the largest impact on women in transition. And what they found is that in our attempt to hasten the transition, we neglect to deal with the emotional aspect. And that is when we find that, one, we stay too long in a state of paralysis because we are not dealing with the emotions that's part and parcel of a transition. Or two, we try to get out of it too quickly and we repeat the same mistakes over and over. Because you see, a transition is described as a death of sorts. Using myself as an example, and I'm sure many of you listening to me probably experienced this at one time in your life, the loss of a job puts you into a transition. And that was my experience after spending 16 plus years in the corporate world. I lost my job. And after that, I spent 2 years in a state of transition paralysis. And the reason why, as I said, if you don't deal with the emotional aspect of it, you could run the chance of staying too long in a state of paralysis, is because I failed to understand my feelings. I poured my entire life into my career. And so, having lost this job, I felt as if I lost my identity. I did not know who I was. And so, I was in that state of paralysis. And it's only when I started to deal with the grief, because I was grieving the loss of my identity, who Jiselle was, and the fear of the unknown. I didn't know who I would become. And it's only when I started to address and process it, similarly to the death of a loved one. When someone is going through their grieving period, they must address it. They can't ignore it. They can't be like the ostrich and put their heads in the ground. It's only when I started to do that, that brought an end to my paralysis experience. And so with this technique, I'll take you through the letters and you will get a sense of how to apply this technique to future transitions that you would experience. Because as long as you continue to live this life, you will experience a transition. So the I stands for identity and investigate. So first, investigate. I had to investigate the root cause of my grief, of my emotional state. Why did I feel this way? And treat it as if I managed grief, because it was a form of grief. I experienced loss. And then I identified, okay, so what are my challenges now? I identified my challenges. What competencies do I need to address these emotions? And then I also identified, do you need external intervention, Jiselle? So you would ask yourself these questions as you investigate and identify your emotions as you go through your transition. C. The C stands for competency, transferal, and development. What do you mean by competency, transferal, and development, Jiselle? Remember, I said I spent 16 plus years in the corporate world, and many of you have had that experience. And over time, you would have developed competency, skills. You were good at what you did. And so I realized I was having a hard time transferring those acquired competencies that I had in my toolkit to what I wanted to enter into, which was being an empowerment speaker, a coach, and mentor. I couldn't make the transfer. And so what I had to do and what I recommend you to do, you would do what is called a competency audit. You perform an audit of your competencies. And so that's what I did. I said, Jiselle, I answered, yes. Make a list of all the competencies that you have acquired over 16 years. And then select from that list what competencies you need now as you transition into creating this new career for yourself. I did that. Second thing I did, I identified what competencies I needed for the short term, for now, for the medium term, and for the longer term. Also, a part of performing a competency audit, you need to identify the gaps. So I also had to ask myself, Jiselle, are there any competencies that you don't possess that you need to transition into this new period? And that's what I did. And I saw that I had the tools I needed to make this transition. The L stands for learning for resilience. Because you see, to accomplish a transition successfully, you need a mindset of resilience. And so you have to do 3 things. Unlearn some things from your past season. They can't go forward with you. You have to relearn some things. You probably knew some things, but you have to relearn them as you transition into this new season. And then you have to reframe some things. 3 R's. Yeah? U and 2 R's. Unlearn, relearn, reframe. The A stands for assessment, because I tell women all the time, it makes no sense you investigate the emotions, you perform your competency audit, you develop a learning regimen, and then you make the same mistakes because you are not assessing your success. With each transition, you should be getting better at responding to your transition and applying these techniques so that you navigate more skillfully. And if you're not putting anything in place to measure that, then you are doing half the work. So I encourage people to put a system in place where they do some self-assessment. And the last letter, P, plan. You need to plan. You need to create a transition plan. You can't be prepared for a transition in the middle of a transition. You need to be prepared for a transition even before it occurs. Then you would prepare through clarifying your expectations. And so you would do some comparing and contrasting, looking at your last transition experience. And so you would modify, and create and clarify the correct expectations. And the E, you execute that transition plan. You see, life will have you in a constant state of transition. But what I want to remind you today is that a transition does not mean the end of a thing. All it means is that you have the opportunity to strategically begin again. To strategically begin again. It was my honor to share with you today and spend these moments encouraging you that it is possible to overcome transition paralysis and navigate through all the disruptions that come with a transition. So go forth. Remember, on the other side of that transition is the life you deserve. Bye.